In this episode, we talk with cancer survivor and heart transplant thriver Derek Fitzgerald of the Recycled Man Foundation. Derek talks about adapting to giant setbacks and imparts knowledge regarding how to build a life worth living despite the adversity, or as Derek Fitzgerald states, a life worth fighting for. So tune in.
Through that tragedy taught me life is finite. You really have a short window to take what it is from life that you want and enjoy it.
You can go back to that day, February 18, 1990, and change what happened. My honest answer is I wouldn't change it.
You're just going to have to go through it, and your strength is going to be found in simply going through it and being authentic and real in the process.
I was talking with my palliative care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that you'll eventually beat this? And I was sort of like, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. My reality.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future, but you know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheels.
Just remembering me as I am, happy and energetic and full of life, no matter what.
You can expect life to kick you in the teeth, but you always get back up, no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson, a podcast about learning to live adaptively.
Yo, what's up, everyone? I am with Derek Fitzgerald right now, so let's jump right into this. What's up, Derek Fitzgerald? Thanks for coming on, man.
Not a problem, Scott. Thanks for having me.
All right, I've got so much to go over with you. We could seriously, for your story, for what you do, your work, your causes, everything, we could go on for probably hours upon hours, but we really can. You travel a lot, you're competing a lot, you're an Ironman, you're in so many different realms. And usually I have a lot of banter back and forth to see what you're up to, but I need to jump into it because your story is so big. I don't want to miss a lot of the pieces, with the time we have. So to get down to it, you have fought some significant battles that includes cancer, and eventually that led to where you received a new heart. And I want to kind of jump into that and say, how old were you when this went down? What was your personal situation like and professional situation in terms of giving some background going into prior to, illness to now?
So I was 30 years old, mm-hmm. and I was flying around the world, just ironically flying around the world, interviewing key thought leaders in oncology, and I had no connection to cancer at the time. And it was one of those things that I was visiting some family members. I started feeling ill. I was 30 years old and I had never had any health issues. So I looked at it as, well, that's peculiar. And I just kind of tried to forget about it, but I kept having issues. And ultimately I got slapped upside of my head enough times that I finally went to go see a doctor, and they spent 3 months sticking every probe up me and down me that they could until finally they said, Derek, you've got cancer. And so I had to deal with what I knew as an interviewer and the process of living with cancer and the treatment of cancer, to becoming one of the people that I had been learning so much about and not really liking everything that I had heard from the doctors. And it was a scary time.
So you had cancer, you get the diagnosis of cancer. How long is treatment?
Treatment for me, well, first they had to remove a tumor the size of a grapefruit from my intestines. So they sliced open my abdominals, took out 4 feet of intestine, and of course the cancerous tumor. And I wake up from surgery, and that's when I learned that I had cancer, and they said, well, we're going to be giving you chemotherapy, and you're probably going to go through 5 months of chemo. But before we can do that, we got to get you back on your feet again. You got to learn how to walk again, because we just cut through all of your abdominals. And so I went through the process of becoming strong enough to withstand the process of chemo and flooding my body with toxins and all the great stuff that goes along with trying to harm your body so much that it kills one thing, but keeps you alive. It doesn't hurt you to the point where it kills you. And that's basically chemo in a nutshell. So I went through 5 months of that. And at the end of those 5 months, they said, congratulations, you're in remission. And at that point, I wanted to get back with my life. It was like this huge sigh of relief.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap, I lived through cancer. I want to get back to my life. After 5 months of chemotherapy and being declared in remission, I was like, well, I got to start working out again. This is a gift. I've got to take this health stuff more seriously. And I got on the treadmill, and I wasn't feeling it initially. Didn't feel very good at all. And then I was walking from the parking lot where I parked at work up to my office. There was a hill. I got halfway up the hill, and I just had to stop. And it was, it sounded like the saliva suction tube when I was breathing at the dentist's office. When I was breathing, it was just gurgles and pops and popcorn sounding.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a lot of trips and time going back and forth to the emergency room trying to figure out, well, is it pneumonia? Is it pleurisy? Is it, what's going on? Why can't I breathe? And why do I keep having these episodes where the world starts spinning and it feels like I'm in the 12th round of a heavyweight fight and I just got knocked out? So I went through that process, and that was only 3 months after I was told that I was in remission from cancer. And after several months of that, probably another 3 months of going to the ER and being told that maybe I had pneumonia or maybe I had pleurisy, or I didn't have any of those things. Finally, one doctor came to my bedside and he said, Derek, I know you've had a tough year. I'm afraid I've got some more bad news. You've got heart failure. And that's why you're having these episodes of fatigue and dizziness. And that's why you're having all these problems with breathing, because your heart's no longer strong enough to pump the fluids out of your lungs. And what we're going to do is hopefully with an exercise regimen and a diet regimen and some medications, we're going to improve your heart function. Maybe not to normal of what we would consider normal, but enough so that you're not so debilitated. And I went through that process for 7 years. And unfortunately, I became progressively worse, not better, to the point where 30-second episodes of dizziness and fatigue became my life. It became 23 hours a day of sleeping and being propped up in bed at night because I couldn't lie down anymore. Because if I did, I would have drowned in my own bodily fluids in my lungs. And closing my eyes every night, trying to go to sleep, wondering whether or not I was going to wake up the next morning. So that was heart failure. And then you go through this process of a heart transplant, where finally my doctor says, you know what? We hoped that your heart would get better. It didn't. It's time to put you on the heart transplant waiting list. Leading into the final months before my transplant, my body started shutting down. So the other organs in my body had been compensating for my heart. And at a certain point, they can no longer withstand that abuse, and they start shutting down. And then your body starts shutting down. And then you get the transplant, and it's the transplant itself where they crack your chest open and they take out your old heart and they put in the new heart, and they sever the vagus nerve, and you don't have any nerves going to this new engine, that makes everything go. And they put you on 50 plus medications a day starting out. And by the way, you're on such high dosage of steroids for those first few months that a lot of us get transplant-induced diabetes because the prednisone, the steroids, raise our blood sugar, glucose levels. So if you don't manage that within the first 3 months, there's a very strong likelihood that your diabetes becomes permanent and you're staying on steroids the rest of your life. So there's all these things that you have to do, and they give you this manual saying, by the way, don't mess it up, because the result of messing up how you manage your diet and your exercise and all these things is you dying, is going into heart failure and dying. I was transplanted January 3rd, 2011. And for that first month of January, I continued to atrophy. I was on the cardiac and diabetic diet. And I was spending all day in bed just trying to lift my head an inch off of a pillow. If nobody was there to help me out of bed, I just stayed there, and I would just, come on, today I'm going to try and get my head an inch off of a pillow. And if somebody could lift me out of bed, then I could get in a walker and I could do laps around the hospital wing. But if not, I was stuck in bed. And so you can't lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk. And it became a process. How do I learn to walk again? So between cancer and the heart transplant, I had been sliced open from below my belt line to the base of my neck. Everything had been severed all the way down. So it was just a process of how do I learn to walk again? And like I said, it started with trying to lift my head off of a pillow an inch. And after a while, I went down from 155 pounds at transplant down to 125 pounds in the months following transplant. I was skin on bone. I had a little bit of butt muscle. Laying in bed, I would wiggle myself out of bed, fall to the floor, and start crawling from one side of my bedroom and back until I hit a vertical surface, at which point I would painstakingly, agonizingly try and push my face up a wall or a chair or a sofa or something so I could get upright and so that I could walk on my feet if no one was around to help me. So I went from that to the old man shuffle using a walker, to losing the walker, and then ultimately walking very slowly, and then learning how to lift my shoulders up again, lift my shoulders back. And it was at a cardiac rehab that I went from interval training of a 9-minute and 55-second walk to a 5-second jog, and slowly decrease my 9-minute, 55-second walking time to 9-minute and 45-second, and then have a 15-second jog. And when I say jog, I mean level 2, level 3 on the treadmill, really slow stuff.
Sure.
And finally, it was during a cardiac rehab session that I got up to 30 seconds on the treadmill. I was feeling great. I had this tingling sensation in my body. I didn't know what was going on. And so I jogged another 30 seconds, and that had been a full minute that I'd been jogging. That was the longest I had jogged, not just since transplant, but probably since I was a teenager in college. And then that tingling became stronger on the treadmill, and I picked up my pace again. And while my therapist was looking away, I jogged for a third set of 30 seconds. And with that, my footsteps got lighter, and my hair just stood on end on my arms and on the back of my neck. And I got a runner's high on the treadmill in cardiac rehab. And with that runner's high, I got a flood of memories of what it felt like to be healthy, because I'd forgotten. And it was a powerful experience. And I wanted to honor my donor and what I had been through and what this gift I'd been given meant to me, by being the best that I possibly could, being the best transplant recipient that I possibly could. And I just wanted to feel more of that strength and more of that energy and feel healthy again. So now, I've gone from the cancer to the heart failure to the heart transplant, and now I'm a full-blown athlete. I train 7 days a week. And as you said earlier, I've I'm an Ironman now. I've done 6 full Ironman triathlons. I've done another probably 5 or 6 half irons. I've ridden my bicycle from the Santa Monica Pier to Avalon, New Jersey, 3,400 miles across the country. I've competed in over 100 events, whether they're 5Ks or Ironman or an Olympic distance try or a marathon. And all of it is amazing for me. I mean, I'm so grateful to be able to do it, but it's still a process because now I have to still maintain this heart, and I have to be compliant with medication. So, and that includes when I'm in the middle of an Ironman, I have my medications that I have to take every 12 hours so that my body doesn't reject this heart. So I get into the water at 7 a.m. I plan it. If I take my meds at 8 or 9 o'clock, I have my meds waiting for me on the bike. And no matter where I am on the bicycle at that point, I pull over the side, I take my meds, take a couple swigs of water, I get back on the bike, and I keep going. And then if it's an Ironman and it's an all-day event, I'm still going to be going at it 12 hours later. So probably on the run at that point, hopefully on the run at that point. So I have another set of medications waiting for me in one of the special needs bags. So I stop what I'm doing. I take my medications again. And I monitor my heart the entire time. When I started running and started swimming and biking and all that stuff, I had all the chest straps and, the wrist heart monitor. And I was very diligent in how I monitor my heart. But basically now I still do that. But for me, if I'm out there running or biking or whatever, if I can feel my heartbeat thudding in my ears, I know that I've hit a red zone, and I just throttle back at those points and, just ease off on the gas. I let my heart settle in, find a good pace again until the thumping subsides. And then I'm good. And really it's those little tips and tricks that I've just personally learned by doing all this stuff that's helped me get to where I am today. And it's just, I'm so ridiculously lucky to be alive and to be able to compound just that with everything else that I'm able to do. It's ridiculous. I'm just extremely fortunate.
You are. Now, you gave us a lot to digest there. I am wondering, who was around you when this all went down? Did you have a support system at the time of initial diagnosis of cancer and then all the way through? Family, friends? Who was there to support you?
Yeah, I was married at the time that I was diagnosed with cancer, and I'm no longer married, but my wife is my ex-wife was a saint. She was she was and still is an amazing person who really took care of me. And my family gathered around me. My friends supported me. It was just what I've done and what I've been able to do and what I continue doing. It's not just been that I'm a special, unique guy. It's the fact that I've had all these amazing people surrounding me from the get-go to help me get to where I am.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It seems like there's a strong support system. But your story, I got to jump in with a really big question. Look, so
Sure.
With your story, you went from battling cancer, invasive surgeries, getting cut open, having things manipulated, cut out, removed, continual treatments for cancer. Eventually you get this feeling, hey, I beat this. We're in remission. We won this thing. Then you go in and you're having trouble. Like you're saying, you're breathing hard. You're having difficulties. And you have that doctor come up to you and say, your heart is failing and it's due to cancer treatments. And eventually you land in a hospital with end-stage heart failure. And by chance you receive a donor heart, which is amazing, super awesome, super amazing. And then you begin this long climb from a hospital bed where you describe it as crawling and eventually a shuffle and eventually a walk and eventually a run. and then you finish your first Ironman. And Ironman is no joke. It is an incredibly intense physical and mental challenge. And your tribe watches you cross that finish line. Your people, your loved ones, your family who have been there, who saw you at those, horrifying moments of helplessness during surgery, after surgery, the humbling experience of it all. What did it mean to you when you crossed that first Ironman and you did it?
Well, to me, it was an exclamation point on my recovery. Every time I go out there and I swim, bike, and run, or even just walk around the block, I remember what it was like to be laying in bed for 23 hours a day. And to be able to live life, I lost so much. And what I describe it as death by atrophy. And I my heart did stop a couple of times, and there were a couple of moments when I died, and I thankfully came back. But more than that is the 7-year process of the heart failure. From, I would say, a year of cancer, 7 years of heart failure. Things get taken away from you. The things that you love to do. It's little bits and pieces at first, and then it turns into an avalanche of things that are just taken away from you, and things that you just say mentally, you hang them up and you say, well, I guess I'm not going to be doing that again. And then it becomes all the things. It's not just the things that you like to do, it's the things that you love to do. And then it's the things that are so deeply ingrained in you. They are the things that you think make you who you are, that they get taken away from you until you're just a person sitting in a bed and barely able to remain conscious.
I kind of jump in there because I'm really, really interested. What type of things got taken away from you that those things were what made you? Do you have like an example?
Well, at one point in my life, I was a workaholic, and I would say that I had this really ridiculous mantra that I had for myself. I thought it was clever at the time. It wasn't, but I wanted to work hard enough, long enough to make enough money to do all the things in life that money can't buy. Wow. And I worked my rear end off, and I did. I made a great living. And I was doing all those things that I thought I wanted to be. Like the younger version of me had put up on a pedestal as all the things that I should be doing as an adult and making it. That was very important to me. And the work that I was able to do, and I was working with pharmaceutical companies, trying to improve people's quality of life through selling medicines to physicians and getting doctors to write more scripts for specific medicines. That was coming up with, inventing technology was a core of who I thought I was. And then I got to the point where I couldn't think anymore. The oxygen that should have been pumping to my brain and to the rest of my body was basically cut down to just the most minimal amount of airflow possible to sustain life. And with that, I was also sleeping 23 hours a day. So my job I had to get rid of. Going out and, hanging out with my friends, I had to get rid of. Spending time with my wife at the time and my family, I had to get rid of, until you're just a shell of a person with no life. And the machines and the drugs are there to sustain you in the hopes that something better comes along. But there's a certain point in that. I mean, it's terrifying to live in that existence. And there was a time at which I hoped my heart would spontaneously regenerate and get better. And then there was a point where I said, whether or not my heart, this donated heart comes to me or not, it either needs to come to me or where it doesn't. But regardless, where I was physically, mentally, my whole existence was not sustainable. And I knew that I either needed to receive a heart and get back to life, or not get the heart and just call it quits. Because where I was just wasn't working, and it wasn't life.
What was it? What was the game you wanted now? You know, what it was before to where you're going now, where you wanted to be?
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. When you go through these significant health challenges, you know, the hospitals are very helpful in helping you do things that you never ever want to think about, which is, what do I do if I'm not here, if I don't make it? And putting together final plans and that whole thing. And that's a tough thing to do at, you know, in your mid-30s.
Hell yeah, that's got to mess with your head real good, man.
It does. And I had no kids, and it, you know, my wife at the time, we'd been trying, and that wasn't happening. And the whole process, when you're in transplant life, the crazy thing about transplant life is that you naturally, as all human beings, if you're sick or you're injured, you want to get better. But as a transplant and someone who's waiting on the transplant list, that mentality has to change, because you actually have to hope to get worse if you want a shot at living. And no matter how bad you feel, you know that there's people out there worse off than you are that are higher on the transplant waiting list. So that's how the pecking order goes. The worse you get, the higher you go on the list. So you have to hope to get as bad as you possibly can without dying. And hope that while you're there on the edge of death, that you're able to sustain that long enough to wait for a heart, or your organ, in my case, the heart, to wait for that donated organ to come in. And you know, the statistics are rough. 22 people a day die waiting for that organ. As I had, at one point, I had hoped upon hope that I would get better. And I was hoping for the best possible scenario. I was also fully prepared for death. And mentally in that space of saying, you know what? I've lived a good life. I've lived a full life. I've got fantastic people that love me and whom I love. And if this is all there is for me, then I'll take it. This has been good.
Accepting death is a huge thing, man. And like you said, you had to go through that process of accepting death. And in your life, one of the things you do is you talk a lot. Like you talk at workshops, TED Talks, everywhere. And you speak on building a healthy, active life. But you also cross over and you talk about the dark spots. Those, not just like, where do we go from now in terms of healthy, positive, active life, but also you speak about, you know, how to traverse those troubles. What do you say?
Well, it's rough. I mean, unless you've been there, it's tough to truly know. And so I talk with a lot of physicians who haven't gone through what they're treating. And they ask me, well, how do you deal with a patient who says, I don't know if I can go on living? And, you know, I'm scared, or I'm a transplant now. And how do I go back to living a life? And what if this organ fails on me? And what does that mean? And so I've sat down with people in that instance who've asked me these things, and I say, okay, so you have a unique perspective on life and death, and let's just say that, yeah, okay, maybe you've got 6 months left to live. It's a huge punch in the gut, but there you've got actually make it a week. Okay, so now you have a week left to live. Now let's scratch that off, and let's just say you've got 24 hours left to live. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to go to your bedroom and pull the cover, climb into bed, pull the covers up tightly around your neck, close all the blinds, don't let any light in. And that's what you're going to do with the last few hours on this earth? Or are you going to do everything in your power to do everything you can with those hours that you have left? You do everything you possibly can, and you live life in every possible way for those 24 hours. And then you get to the end of those 24 hours, and for some reason you're still alive. Well, what do? Well, you wake up the next day and you do it again. And then you do it again, and you keep doing it again. And you string together these days of living life to its fullest. And then you look back at that over whether it's 1 day, 1 week, 6 months, 6 years, or 30 years. And you look back at that and you've earned what you've been given. You've earned that gift of those days and that time. And that's how you string together a phenomenal life.
On your website, Derek Fitzgerald, on Recycled Man Foundation, which is going to be in the show notes, this reminds me, what you just said there reminds me of a saying you have there, fighting for a life worth fighting for. Is that kind of what you mean there? What's a life to you that's worth fighting for?
Well, the Recycled Man Foundation, our whole goal is to help people improve their quality of life. People who've gone through significant health challenges, finding their way back to life. And we do that through helping them become more active. And I've said it before, and I'll say it many times, is that transplantation, organ donation and transplantation, it's a miracle. It's the closest thing to a miracle that medical science can do. But if you aren't going to work on coming back to life, I didn't know what was possible after I was going to receive a heart. Leading up into my transplant was the scariest moments of my entire life. And I didn't know if after my heart transplant, if I would just be sitting on a sofa and watching daytime courtroom TV, watching People's Court. And I thought about how miserable that would be of a life. I didn't know what was possible. And quite honestly, if that were my only shot, I don't know that the transplantation process would have been worth it for me, because it's an incredible, I don't want to say burden, but it's rough. Yeah. And you have to work it. So there's something around that word there, but I'm not going to call it a burden, because it's a gift that for someone out there to choose their last day and their worst day of their life to save the life of a complete stranger. That is a gift. And donors are heroes. They are heroes without a hair of doubt. They are heroes. But as on the recipient side, as with the donor family side, which is absolutely heart-wrenching, the recipient side, it's a scary process. And if you can survive it, if you don't take advantage of the gift that you're given, I don't know that the process is worth it. And coming back out of transplantation, working the system so that I went from, the shuffle to the walk, and from the walk to the jog. You don't have to be an Ironman. I'm not proposing that everyone who gets an organ transplant become an Ironman, but I am saying that you need to become active, and you need to be able to spend the extra bonus time that you've been given doing things that make life meaningful. And whether that's walking around a lake with your loved one and spending time with them and holding their hands and watching a sunset, or going out to dinner, or whatever it is that's important to you as an individual, that's what you have to do. And that's what makes life worth living. If you're just going to go in it for a few extra hours that you don't fill, then I don't know that it's worth it. You have to want to live, and you have to be willing to work for it. And so the whole thing with the Recycled Man Foundation, as you said, is fighting for a life worth fighting for.
It's a way of honoring, it sounds like, honoring those that were donors to you, and then taking that honor, taking that upon yourself to live fully, right? So, to that nature?
Absolutely. That is exactly the case. I mean, I've seen the financial receipt of what it takes for a hospital to transplant a heart into my body. And insurance, I pay my insurance, but my insurance covered that. That doesn't necessarily mean I earned the right to wake up every day with another person's heart beating in my chest. For me, I have to be the deal in my head is that every day I have to earn what's been given to me. And as I said, this person chose their last day to give me a chance at life. And for me, I don't know anything about my donor other than this person had a level of generosity and compassion and integrity to save the life of a complete stranger on their last day. And the only way to earn that is by living each day as fully as possible. That's how I honor my donor. That's how I celebrate the gift.
It's an incredible gift, and it really stresses the importance of being a donor. Reading your story, watching your videos, encountering you, it really does stress that, because these tissues, these organs that are going into the bodies of others, like you, impact others. There's this chain I see where you're making a huge difference in so many different realms, and being that you got that gift, you do live it to the fullest. You might be one of the ones that lives it beyond others, who knows? There's no way of quantifying it, but it is pretty amazing. I know that you also have the Tin Men. What's the Tin Men about?
Yes. Tin Men Endurance Racing is a group of heart transplant recipient athletes. And this team was started between myself and Kyle Garlett, who is an author and a motivational speaker. He is also a cancer survivor, heart transplant recipient, and triathlete. And as I was going through I found out about him as I was going through recovering from my transplant. He and I started the Tin Men together. And this is the team that we use to honor our donors, to celebrate those second chances, and to celebrate life. It's being the group of individuals who never get picked for the sports team when we were younger. But in the game of life, we would have never been picked for anything because we were just so sick.
Yeah.
And to turn that around and be active and to enjoy life and to live it at a level that is our way of honoring our donor. It raises awareness on a grand scheme of things and on a scale that we couldn't do just on our own. So we team together. We bring together all heart transplant recipient athletes for the Tin Men, and we tell the world just how lucky we are and that our hero, our donors are our heroes.
That's pretty badass. I mean, it's just to hear this team that's going out there raising this awareness, going crazy on Ironmans. You guys are kind of nutty though. Ironman, whether you have a transplant or not, there's something wrong with you guys. There's it's like 100 and some miles to bike, swim a couple miles, run a bunch. It's just crazy. It's a crazy sport, man. It's nuts.
Well, yeah. 2.4 swim, 112 mile bike, and then 26.2 mile run, 140.6 total miles. And I think a lot of it is mental. Not only the fact that we are mental for doing it, but it's just a mental state of a frame of thinking. And for those of us who had been in the worst health that you can possibly be. And those of us who came so close to dying, to be able to do something that is a challenge and does hurt, but and celebrates the life that we have, and in certain cases reminds us of the struggle that we had faced and that we have overcome. It's powerful to us, and at the same time, it will never be quite as scary because we're in control of our own lives and of our own destinies on those days. If a run or a triathlon is bad and we're feeling like garbage, we can always pull over to the side and give ourselves a break. That's not the case when you're sick. There is no mercy rule. There is no, tapping out. You live and you die with the luck of the draw that day, unfortunately. And for those of us who have survived, the deal is our responsibility to get back.
I see this image of you, man. You do have it on social media, but like with your story, especially those listening right now, I see this image of you, in a hospital bed, like you said, kind of helpless. And now you're out there, you're like in the sun, you're running, and it just seems so like, that's a big jump from where it was to where it is now. It's incredible. I want to get to this though. From your perspective, I talked about the workshops that you speak at, that you conduct, that you're a part of. And a lot of people aren't healthy, whether it's mental or physical. They're just not nowadays. How do you build a healthy life?
Well, one thing is to understand something that I didn't understand when I was younger. People talk about so much about their bank accounts and what they're investing in. And what I was not doing is investing in myself and investing in my own quality of life. It's something that I now get. I now understand is that every time I do all these things and people ask me what I like about it. And for the first couple of years, I didn't like anything about it. I didn't like running. I didn't like swimming. I didn't like biking.
Yeah.
I didn't like lifting weights. I didn't like yoga. I didn't like any of it. But you know what I did like? I liked the way I felt after the fact. And that was enough to keep me going. And that was enough to allow me to start reaping the long-term benefits of all that work. So another one of the things that I come across is people who have been healthy and have been athletic and have been active in their life. And then they go through some kind of health challenge, whether it's an accident or, a disease or something. And then they try to get back to it. They survive the accident. They survive the challenge, whatever it was. It doesn't have to be a heart transplant, but whatever it was, they get on the other side of it and then they try to jump back into their old life. And mentally, it's a challenge for them. And it's something that I didn't have to face. But mentally for them, they get into this bad zone of, well, it used to be so easy to do this. Why can't I just be back to where I was? And they get into this negative spin cycle. And they get really discouraged in that process. And a lot of them don't keep up with it. You gotta get out of that mindset. And you've got to forget about where you were at the healthiest point in your life. And you have to get back to, where was I yesterday? And that's what I'm competing against. If you can make the slightest incremental improvement over where you were the day before, and then the next day be the slightest incremental improvement beyond that, those little steps add up. And over time, you will build a foundation that is strong, that is solid, and that you can do anything you want to from. It's really hard to find limitations upon that if you just keep investing in yourself and trying to get a little tiny fraction of improvement every day. And so that's how you build it. It's not just, hey, I used to be good and I want to be good again. No, it's work.
Do you have a system? Do you have a system that you can point the audience to, or like a source, maybe a book, maybe videos? Do you have like a system that you can share?
You know what? I have been fortunate enough to be surrounded by just really amazing people. And I started the slow jogs right after transplant. I did my very first 5K that I'd ever done was 8 months after my heart transplant. And then I did my first half marathon 2 months after that. And then I started doing triathlon. My first Olympic distance was, I think it was 14 months after my heart transplant. Every step along the way, I found coaches, I found trainers that helped make me stronger. And at a certain point, there was a plateau where I was not going to be getting any better. I found a guy that I knew prior to all my health issues. I happened to run into him, and when my ex-wife and I had been training, she had a personal trainer leading up to when we were getting married, and a guy by the name of Fernando Paredes.
Mm-hmm.
Fernando was her personal trainer, and he went on and improved himself and learned more and grew his personal training business while I was going through life and death and life again. I found him again, and he had this whole program of core strength training. So when I came back to him, like I said, I had every muscle in my core severed from below my belt line to the base of my neck. And then off on the sides, all these fans out of other surgeries and, gallbladder removals and pacemaker implants and all this stuff. I called it my Franken torso.
Yeah.
And when you close down strength, you get rigidity. Your body tries to protect itself by becoming more rigid and less mobile. And what he did was he took me at, I would say I had the flexibility of a steel reinforced cinder block. And he just broke everything down to its basic core components of functional strength training and helped me go from where I was to where I am now, and improving my range of motion, improving strength throughout that range of motion, tying the muscle groups that had been not only forgotten each other, but severed from each other, and getting them communicating again. From the furthest point on my right big toe to the furthest point on my left index finger, and everywhere in between. And Fernando has a program with Fusion Fitness and Performance. He's physically based where I live in Doylestown. Thankfully, life was kind to me. I live in Doylestown. He's here, and he has hooked me up on so many levels that I can't even imagine where I would have been had I not linked back up with Fernando. But he's a phenomenal human being, and he's a phenomenal coach. But beyond that, just a really, really good human being, and he's helped me tremendously. I teamed up with him as a strength coach, and then I teamed up with a guy by the name of Todd Wiley as a triathlon coach. And he was the guy, when I first jumped into a pool, he was the guy that said, all right, swim to the other end of the pool and back. Let me see what you got. And I swam to one end of the pool, and I was out of breath. I thought I was going to die. He's like, all right, come on back. And I swam back, and I'm out of breath. And he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I just had a heart transplant however many months ago. I think I'm out of shape, but, I can kind of swim. He's like, well, let me disagree with you, and let me propose this idea. I would say he said, I would suggest that it's your poor technique and your inability to swim that's making you feel like you're so out of shape. So do this. Just swim to the other end of the pool back right now again, go. And I skimmed across the top of the water, slammed my head into the far side of the pool, and swam the whole way back. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and do whatever the hell you tell me to do from here on out. And he laid out the groundwork. He made the plan for me to be able to do Ironman Lake Placid and the 6 other fulls that I've done and every other race I've done. So between Todd and Fernando, those guys, so Fusion Fitness and Performance for Fernando Paredes. And if you look up Todd Wiley Sports, between the two of them, you cannot go wrong. They
Nice.
took this beat up old jalopy of a body and turned me into an Ironman.
That sounds really good. I mean, Fernando sounds awesome. He sounds pretty incredible. So I'm definitely
He's a
going
mad
to link him.
scientist.
He sounds like a mad scientist. Oh, it sounds like they both sound like mad scientists. So when you talk about like you got physically healthy, that's a huge thing. But the mental side of being mentally healthy, you talk about all this resilience. I mean, you may not see it that way, but I see it as resilience. I see you adapting, and physical stuff, adapting to physical stuff is very much a challenge. But the mental side of adapting to things, did you have any system in place, or what did you utilize to survive out there mentally?
There are so many facets of health that I had to monitor coming out of transplant. In fact, once you go through a heart transplant, I was transplanted at Penn Medicine, and I was given a 3-ring binder of how, what vitals I had to track at what time, taking 50 plus medications a day, all at high dosages, the exercise regimen that I had to maintain, the dietary restrictions that I had to follow, and living on a cardiac diet, living on a diabetic diet, all these things. I actually created, I come from a technology background, and what I did was I actually created a technology to help myself track all that data and then communicate that with my physician team.
What do you mean, like an app or a spreadsheet or something?
I created an app, and people talk about wearable technology, and that was a huge buzzword 8 years ago as I was getting my transplant. But what I was doing was I was trying to make the data collection process. I mean, the decisions that your doctors can make to help you get better are only as good as the data that goes into it. And I tried to help that process along by making the data retrieval and collection process as passive as possible and make it as little work for myself as I possibly could. So I programmed my heart rate monitor watch to wirelessly upload information to my phone and to my iPad, and the blood pressure cuff that was wireless, and I could feed that data into my vital tracking system as well. And the thermometer that I was using was also feeding the data in. So all I had to do was really, if I was sleeping a lot one day and I didn't want to track all the stuff into a 3-ring binder and write it all out, I would slap a blood pressure cuff on me, and it would feed the data into the system. And I was always wearing my heart rate monitor watch, so I knew where my heart rate was at all times. And so that information would funnel into a dashboard, and that dashboard would be shared with my physician team. So they were able to look at it very easily and say, oh, well, this is what's going on here, so raise or lower these dosages here. And it tracked my diet, it tracked my exercise regimen, and it became a system that I used. And it took what doctors were prescribing as like a 5-year regimen of recovery and basically shrunk that down into 2 years. And so now I'm doing all this active stuff, and I love my doctors at Penn, but if I can reduce the amount of times that I'm spending driving into the hospital, driving to the city, driving to the hospital, spending the day in the hospital, coming back, then I'm out there, I'm living life, and I'm enjoying life and everything that I've been given. So basically now I will be 8 years post-transplant in January. And I go to the doctors twice a year. I'm on the lowest minimum dosages possible for my medications. I've gone from 50 pills a day down to really the 2 immunosuppressants that I have to take to make sure that my heart doesn't reject, or that my body doesn't reject the heart. And then some vitamins to counteract some of the effects that the immunosuppressants have on my body. And that's it. I take them every 12 hours. I have the alarms that go off. I have my support team. My fiance here has the alarms on her phone as well. And if it's time for meds, then she's like, Derek, you take your meds, your alarms go off. And so everything that I do, everything that I had leading out of transplant was tracked and monitored and maintained. It made it a lot more manageable in a ridiculously stressful time.
I wonder, well, you're super bright, obviously. You're building apps to track your progress or track your status and help doctors make decisions, and Penn doctors at that. We're talking the University of Pennsylvania, which is, top notch in a top 5, right, of hospital systems.
Oh yeah. They're number 1 in my book. They didn't just bring me back. They made me better.
Very lucky if you're going to be sick somewhere, but I wonder,
exactly.
Well, I wonder about, like, we have the Recycle Man Foundation. We have the Tin Men. We have you speaking. You're at TED Talks. Where are you going next, man?
I have my nonprofit in the Recycle Man Foundation. My for-profit now, that technology that I told you I built to maintain and monitor my own health, that kind of spawned my own company, a new company. And so we're leading up to cancer and my transplant. I had been making custom technology for Big Pharma. I sold that to my partners and I walked away from it. And I created this new company after my transplant. And what this new company does, it's my for-profit, and the whole goal behind that is to do all the same things that I used to do for Big Pharma, but do it for the end patient and try and help people improve their quality of life through technology. And that's what that does. So everything that I'm doing is about helping people improve their lives and their quality of life, whether it's for a profit-based model or a non-profit-based model.
Sure.
And it working for Big Pharma was great. And I found it was extremely rewarding, but both personally and professionally and financially, it was great. But now I work with end patients and I relate to end patients. There aren't too many conditions out there that someone can say they have that I haven't been through myself. I'm like the guinea pig for, any cancer related or cardiac related or transplant related ailment. And even if it's not any of those 3 things, obviously it's a big healthcare world out there. But I can relate to being a patient. And for me, helping other patients improve their life is what feeds my soul. So do I make as much money as I used to? Heck no. But now taking the time and living life and giving back is soul food. And so, I go out to hospitals and I sit down with people who are now in the same place that I was 8 years ago, who don't know what life is going to be like for them after transplant, and they don't know what to expect. Or people who've just been transplanted and have those same questions about what is possible. And I just walk in those rooms and I sit down next to them and I say, I get it. I know where you're at. This is what's possible. And really, the sky's the limit, because, you get that transplant, you get a chance. And, the door of life is closing quickly, but basically you get that transplant and it's like you just shoved your foot in the door and kept it from closing. You get a sliver of light that comes through, and it's up to you now as a patient to work your arm, work your hand in that crack, and work the elbow in that crack, and get your shoulder in, and then just blow the door open and make every bit of that moment worth it. And it's up to you to work for it. So that's what I'm doing now. And to be able to talk to people when they are at their lowest points and understanding they have to get worse before they can get better. And it's a scary, scary point. And they're like, I feel like I'm going to die. You mean I have to get worse than this? And the answer is yeah. And then you just have to hang on. But once you get that transplant, then the world is your oyster, and you have a chance, and it's up to you to decide what you're going to do to grab it.
It's pretty amazing to think that you not only did, you go through all this, but then you've also found a path like in a professional realm. I feel like a lot of people hate their jobs. They hate what they do. They hate what they're involved in, or they may like it enough not to change, but now you're doing something, big pharma is big money, but now you're in a realm where you can actually be there with a patient. And it seems like you're super passionate, really enjoying it. You're very lucky to be at that spot, but probably when you're staring death in the face, you start to reassess how much of the system am I going to play in, or am I just going to create my own?
Exactly.
Before we wrap this up, are you cool with people reaching out to you on social media? Do you like emails? If they want to reach out to you to get help, what's the best way? Or just talk to you?
Obviously, I do a lot of races. So if people see me at races, feel free to come up to me and talk. My goal is to be approachable and as transparent about all this stuff as I possibly can be. My life's an open book. So if there's questions, please ask them. But people can always reach out to me through the recycledman.com website, or Recycled Men Facebook page, Recycled Men Foundation Facebook page.
We'll have links.
And yeah, please share the links. I'm happy to talk to people. I'm on Instagram. FitzDB is my Instagram handle. Twitter, I believe, is the same. And reach out. There's a number of different ways to get in touch with me.
Speaking of your Instagram page and Facebook, do you have like a team of professional photographers that just follow you, man? Because like your photos are really good, and they're like, it just seems like that's like what's going on, man.
Thank you. Well, you know what? When you do a lot of races, that's the joke I make is that I'm athletic. I'm an athlete now, but I am not a fast athlete by any stretch of the imagination. So when I do a race and you've got 3,000 people in an Ironman, and you're one of the people that are the last to finish, all the great photographers have nothing else to do but go to the finish line and wait for the last stragglers. And you get the best photographers in the world, taking your picture. So it's a bonus in that regard. I've got some really good photos taken of me by these amazing photographers who would have normally gone home once all the winners have finished. So that's my little hack, my little pro tip for the back of the pack athletes out there. Other than races, no, I don't have a professional photographer, although my fiance is an artist and a very good photographer. So I'll have to say it's all her. And I would be extremely remiss if I did not mention, of all the phenomenal things that have happened to me in the past 14 years. I've been living past cancer, and now it will be 8 years in January with a heart transplant. I'm going to have a 5-year-old daughter in January. And she, I will always say that I received the gift of life, but she was the miracle. And she did some research into the CDC, saw that over the course of my health crisis, during that time, just under 12 million people in the United States alone died from either cancer or cardiac disease. And here I am. I'm on the other side of it. I'm not just living, but I'm thriving. And when I think about that and wondered why, all those times, why am I still here? All I do now is look no further than my daughter. And I know that she is here because I survived that, and she's why.
That's pretty awesome, man. Kids are the best, right? They drive us.
They are.
Well, you're building your tribe.
Yeah.
You got a tribe, man. You got a good tribe around you.
Well, thank you. I think so too.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your message. And man, it's a really big story. You have a really huge story. You got a lot going on, and you're really good at what you do. And I hope people reach out to you and talk to you, because you have a method of going from, the dark to the good, to finding a way of building a good life, a healthy life, an active life, a happy life, passionate life.
Well, thank you.
Thanks to Derek Fitzgerald for coming on. You can find contact information for guests in the show notes or on our website, livingadaptive.com. On livingadaptive.com, you can also find previous episodes, writings, and a bunch of other good stuff. So go there. Peace.